making sure that all Minnesotans are able to get the information in a timely and accurate manner. And I think, as you have come to see, that nobody does that better. So, Nick, thank you. Minnesota, today is the first day of phase 3 of our reopening plan. I want to take a moment to thank those businesses and thank Minnesotans, the restaurants, the gyms, the entertainment venues. A lot of studies have been done, certainly in recent weeks, showing the number of lives that were saved by the stay-at-home orders. But those stay-at-home orders did come at a cost, and it was an economic cost to many of those businesses. So we owe you a debt of gratitude. We certainly hope that the reopening plans and finding a stable place where Minnesotans feel confident and safe to come back, get out into those businesses, get the opportunity to enjoy a meal, to go back to the gym, to participate in retail transactions, all of the things we know that'll help the economy. So we are really grateful. We've said it before, we turn the dial as the data seems to support that. I think all of us are watching intently. 19 states are on the climb. Minnesota is not one of them, climbing back up. And we saw a situation in Arizona that had opened up, Arizona specifically, and now are having to roll back some of those openings. They have now activated their excess hospital capacity and are looking at some of their alternate care sites because the numbers are climbing. So I remind Minnesotans that the pandemic is far from over. It is at a new phase. Our phase in terms of economics, but it is a new phase of us trying to maintain social distancing, trying to wear masks. I would note that we still encourage people who were involved in expressing their First Amendment rights to advocate for change for the murder of George Floyd and for other reasons to get tested. My wife and I were in those streets. We were out with people in front of my house. We were down at 38th in Chicago, and we were at the memorial. We tested yesterday, tested positive. I would tell people it's very quick, it's very easy. We want to bring those as close to you as possible. So we should. Negative. Pardon me? Oh, excuse me, it tested negative. We had this thing, we were joking, I apologize. We were having this thing that negative is a positive in this state. So yes, we tested negative, both of us. I apologize for that. But I encourage people to get out there. We will watch it again, and the way this works is they will probably retest us again in 7 days, and I think Minnesotans should start to see it that way. Our capacity to be able to do that is there now. We are now testing per 100,000 is about as high as anywhere where we want it to be, and this is probably going to be an ongoing thing. So Minnesotans, I would tell you, get tested. If you were out there this weekend and this past couple weeks, please do that. Today, I'm issuing the proclamation of calling Minnesota legislature into special session beginning Friday, June 2nd, or excuse me, June 12th. I misspeaking today. Much has happened since we recessed on May 18th. Much has happened surrounding COVID-19, the tragic murder of George Floyd that shook Minnesota, this nation, and the world to its core has happened. We have moved the needle on COVID-19. There's just a lot of differences between May 18th and this coming Friday. And so our priorities are very clear from an administration's perspective: police reform and accountability and economic recovery. We will continue on the COVID-19. Our commitment is strong. Our systems are strong in Minnesota. We're able to continue to move the dial, monitor, provide PPE, and provide what's needed, but with an eye towards if we start to turn the wrong way, we come back. But this moment will not be upon us again. The moment that has been given to us is very clear. I encourage the legislature to prove to Minnesotans, and we have our responsibility to work with you, to compromise, to find bold, aggressive, transformative action is what the public is crying for. Let's show them that democracy works. Let's show them in this moment that what those people did going to the streets makes a difference. Let's show them that by raising up their voices and asking for change, it can come about. Let's show them that even in a divided legislature, those things that draw us together as human beings, the ability to be safe in your community, the ability to trust those that are there to serve you will be there to do that, and that we are not stuck in patterns that continue to repeat themselves generation after generation, that we can change those. The senseless killing of George Floyd is that opportunity. We were on the phone, I'm sure the Lieutenant Governor will talk about this morning, with other mothers who had lost their children. We were on the phone with mayors in northern Minnesota. We were on the phone with the NAACP. We were on the phone with other governors. The commitment across the spectrum, both political, racial, economic, for change is undeniable. This special session gives us the opportunity of what Minnesotans want to see us do. Move positive change, move transformational change, and get your work done. Get the work done with respect. So I know some of the questions will come today is how long will this special session be? We need to quit seeing legislating as a time constraint exercise and see it as a results-based exercise. We can leave when we get the people's work done. We can leave when we make sure that we've addressed and started on a path to true reform. We can leave when we pass economic measures like a bonding bill and the rebuilding of these corridors that were damaged. That's when we can leave. And I think that's the attitude going into it, that there's collaboration and cooperation around that. We can build a stronger, more equitable economy. This can impact positively all corners of our state. This is not a metro issue alone. Police-involved killings have a higher percentage outside the metro area than inside the metro area. Inequities in school have an impact all across the state. This is our chance. And this call to a special session is not a call just from me. It's that primal scream you heard from people on the streets demanding justice, demanding it now, and demanding us step into this moment. The community will have the answers. The community will have the solutions. The St. Paul NAACP provided 10 very clear things that they gave to us that will start to address the police accountability issue, but will also address the economic inequities. Very clear things that can be enacted now and can make a difference. And these are generational, transformational leaders that are bringing these to us. So the time to debate and walk away is over. The time to debate, come up with solutions, implement them, and continue to move forward is on us. We can start, and those work is being done now. The People of Color and Indigenous Caucus has put together an incredible package. It has been supported by people across the spectrum, and the work that Commissioner Harrington and Attorney General Ellison has done. Those are being supported by our largest business partnerships. People who know that the way you attract businesses is by making sure they're equitable, making sure that people know that this is a community they want to live in and want to settle in. And that's what this special session can be about. So we've been given a unique opportunity. On the heels of the tragedy of George Floyd's murder, on the heels of COVID-19 decimating our economy, we're given an opportunity to change those structures, to change them in a way that makes a difference. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for what all Minnesotans have done. And I especially want to say a thank you to Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, who this has been her life's work on equity and inclusion. She was a successful legislator. She was a successful advocate for nonprofits and children. And now as Lieutenant Governor, leading up many of these efforts. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan.
Thank you so much, Governor. Good afternoon, everyone. I also was tested yesterday for COVID-19. I was not positive. I was negative. And would just say for folks who are afraid to get tested, it's okay. It feels like a tickle in your nose. It's over before you know it. Please get tested. So the past few weeks, and months have been some of the most challenging, I think, we've experienced in this state's history for everyone. But the burden of these crises have fallen hardest on the most vulnerable folks amongst us, on Minnesotans who are already in crisis, on those who too often are invisible to decision makers. The COVID-19 pandemic and the murder of George Floyd have laid bare systemic inequities that have been simmering under the surface of our state for generations, and I would argue since the founding of the state. Minnesota is a great place to live and work and raise a family if you are white. But too often, the color of your skin or the zip code where you live determines your opportunities to thrive or even survive. But we can change that right now. This morning, I had a conversation along with the governor with Valerie Castile, the mother of Philando Castile. And what she said to me and to us shook me to my core. She said, God gave you Philando, but Philando wasn't enough. And now God has given you George Floyd. We cannot let this opportunity pass. It is too important. We will not Minnesota nice our way out of the situation we find ourselves in. This requires bold action. Special sessions have become not so special in that they are a regular occurrence in the cycle of Minnesota politics. But what's before us in this moment is not business as usual. It is an extraordinary opportunity in an unprecedented moment. We must work with Black and Brown communities to pass meaningful changes to public safety and criminal justice systems. We must rebuild an economy that lifts up all Minnesotans, especially people of color and those in greater Minnesota, whose economic well-being and businesses has been hit the hardest. We must follow our Black, Indigenous, and people of color, the leaders who've been doing this work for generations and on the front lines, who have been continuously bringing solutions, but have not yet been truly heard. The entire world is watching Minnesota. They're watching what happens next. After the charges are filed, after the demonstrations end, and as folks desire to return to normal, will anything change? Normal was not working for people of color. This requires systemic change. And our answer must be yes, that we are ready to step into this moment, that Minnesota can be a model, and our state can show how we can listen to communities. They will be heard and seen and valued, and the solutions that come directly from them will be the solutions that we move in the legislature. Thank you.
With that, the Lieutenant Governor and I are, and we have the Commissioner Harrington here, and we have Myron Franz here from MMB to talk about what's next. So. Yes. Yes. Well, we are extending the emergency. The emergency is still upon us. And again, Minnesota law is vague on a peacetime emergency extending beyond 30 days. We have taken the conservative interpretation of that says the legislature needs to come back and needs to vote either yes or no. And if they can agree in the House and the Senate, if there's an agreement to stop it together, then the peacetime emergency would be taken off. I would caution against that in that we are still in this. When we started this, if you can remember clear back on March 13th, we talked about we were opening the toolbox that allowed us to do certain things. Those certain things are to allow us to use the National Guard to test at sites across the state. They allow us to waive some of the licensing requirements to put people in positions where we need them. It allows us to lift some of the requirements on trucking, for example, when we needed to move the hogs from Worthington, those types of things. Plus, it accesses $50 million a month in federal assistance. Every state in the union did this. Well over 40 of them are still in this. I spoke with Midwestern governors, Republican and Democrats last night, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and myself. all are in this situation and all are keeping their peacetime emergencies in place because it allows procurement to move faster, because otherwise we would be back with the sealed bid process. It would take us 90 days to get masks in the regular order. And if we end up in a situation like Arizona where we need to react quickly, we think it makes sense. But that is right. And then to finish the unfinished business. Yes. I think, yes, I think we should get it done. And saying that these take time, these ideas have been around for generations. These ideas were in our criminal justice reform bills last year that never got any hearings. So the idea that all of a sudden, oh, this just sprung upon us and we had no ideas that we should ban chokeholds, that's been out there for a long time. This is the point where what fueled the rage on the streets was this idea that we'll just wait till there's a better time to fix this, or this is going to. I'm not saying we need to rush headlong, and I'm not saying all this is going to happen overnight, because let's be very clear. Police reform and police accountability is one piece of this. Educational reform and opportunity gaps is another. Inequities in healthcare is another. Inequities in how we do procurement in state government for people is another thing, as well as all of this other. But the idea to say that we're going to wait. Why would they believe we would wait and get it done? We didn't get anything done during the regular session, and I think it grinds down. I think now what makes the legislature work is leverage, and there's leverage on the street, and we can get this right. There's smart people who have worked on these. They've worked in other towns. Commissioner Harrington himself has spent a ton of time in Camden, New Jersey, across the country, looking at different models, both in that. We're looking at different models of education. So I would encourage them, let's get as much done as we can. Let's not believe this is too hard and push it off. Tom?
You say the Minnesotans who say the representatives closest to them, senators and House members, have no say in a lot of the things you're doing, especially when they feel like they've become voiceless in this process as the emergency powers continue to get extended month after month.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's certainly true. That's not. And the other thing is all of the authority under the emergency that there was granted by the legislature and state law, and that has been upheld in the courts. I, more than anything, would have to tell you, and I talking to other governors, I want to figure out how we unwind and get this back to a regular order working. But the fact of the matter is, all 50 states and the national government have a situation in place that recognize the regular order will move too slow in an emergency situation. I am more than willing, and now one of the things is we've been having this conversation about the local aid, the Corona Relief Fund, and 45% of this, $667 million, I thought we should have got that out during the regular session. We're debating how that should be done. If every single decision gets drugged down in an emergency, it takes time. So I hear them. I think the legislature is a co-equal branch as a whole, and at this point in time, that toolbox, we're putting things back in that toolbox. We moved to phase 3, we're taking some of those things out, but I really worry. Just think about this. If I wouldn't extend the emergency executive order, it's $50 million in federal assistance for the month that goes away, and we would have tens of thousands of evictions start Saturday morning. There is no legislative fix being proposed to fix these things.
As a quick follow-up, Senator Gazelka suggested the possibility of more than one special. Come back and in the first one, do the bonding bill, COVID-19 funding, things that are already kind of teed up. And then adjourn, and then maybe come back a while later when there's time to deliberate more public safety. You'll be open to that kind of scenario?
I don't want to call the National Guard back to the streets here, because I think that's what would end up happening if we don't address this. I think the sense of urgency around those, I think we can multitask. I would ask them to try and do this. I mean, those things that were teed up in the work that Commissioner Harrington did, those things that were teed up in the Posse Caucus are things that have been heard in years past. Many of them are endorsed, as I said, by the business partnership, not known as a bastion of liberalism on social issues, but they're saying these are things that bring that back. So I think, I'm listening. It may be a series of special sessions, but I would really, really encourage the legislature to not miss this opportunity. The state legislature in New York has already passed a statewide ban on chokeholds. Now, we saw the Minneapolis City Council do that, but it is not in the state. We have cities across the state. Why would we not take that up now if the state of New York did it? I think Lieutenant Governor's point on this is the world's watching how we act on this. Let's seize this moment. Let's not think small. Let's think big. I'll go. Yes. Yeah, and I know that the legislators speaking with State Patrol, Colonel Langer, they're speaking with the Historical Society. I think there will be some changes. This is always a very delicate line, because if the legislature's in session, that's the people's house. The people need to be there. And I am anticipating, just by the energy that's out there, that folks will want to be on the lawn, will want to be a part of this. I think we have to strike a proper balance where their presence is felt, but we're able to carry out business both from a COVID-19 perspective and a security perspective. So we're working with them. This is one where this is a conversation amongst all of us. The legislature's thinking about how they will do their business in this mode. Yeah. What I would say on that is you saw this last week, we took an unprecedented step. The Minnesota Department of Human Rights under Commissioner Lucero brought the commissioner's charge of discrimination against the Minneapolis Police Department. That charge was embraced by the city council and the mayor. They sat down and there was a list of things we wanted to see in the short run. They started doing that. That was the chokehold ban and some of those things. The Posse Caucus, the People of Color and Indigenous Caucus, as long and in conjunction with the work that Commissioner Harrington and Attorney General Ellison, they put forward a set of things. We are not bringing administrative proposals because I think Esme's point is right on this. They've heard some of this, and this idea that legislative leaders are going to step in with their proposals. This is going to have the momentum of the community behind it, and many of those proposals that the Posse Caucus is bringing up, we're supporting that. We're supporting that slate of legislative proposals. Well, I think the use of force pieces in there have to be the first one. I think we have to tackle what scares people the most. The chokehold piece, how we redefine use of force, some of the training that goes behind that, and then the accountability. How are you going to be able to account for it? How are you going to be able to tell what are reports that are done? I think that physical security piece that is very real and you can feel it amongst people needs to be the start. And then the city council in Minneapolis is starting the conversation. How do we envision security in our communities? How do we envision what that's going to look like? And again, I think they've got 22 proposals because the community believes those 22 things will make it better. I hope we don't approach this session and say, well, we'll give you 6 and then we'll trade you for this. I don't think they're really in a trading mode on this. Again, I would go back to, this is about these proposals have been thought out, they've been tried elsewhere, and we think they're effective. Go ahead.
John Harrington, Commissioner of Department of Public Safety. No, we still believe that the Post Board needs to be, like other professional regulatory boards, should have the authority to take licenses away. And we recognize that taking licenses away, whether it's suspension, revocation, or other lawful processes, is what you see in boards of medical practice and legal practice. That's how professions regulate themselves, is to make sure that people that do not abide by the rules, who are found to be outside of the norms of practice, should be held accountable. And I believe that's different than what a police chief can do under a collective bargaining agreement in many cases. So from my perspective, the post board has a absolutely central role in keeping good cops good and making sure that bad cops can't practice in the state of Minnesota. Well, I think there are a lot of good reasons to be guardedly optimistic, and you know me, guardedly optimistic is probably as good as I ever get. We're in the midst of a change. The executive director at the Post Board has changed. The leadership, the chair of the Post Board has changed. I do believe that there is an appetite for change that there might not have been there before. I also think that the George Floyd murder is absolutely a change, a moment of change for the profession. It's a moment for change for the community. It's a moment that has changed our world. And I think with that as the backdrop, the idea that those officers would have had to wait for a arbitration and grievance hearing to no longer be allowed to be police officers in the state of Minnesota did not make sense to me then. It doesn't make sense to me now. And so I believe the Post Board should have that authority and should be taking that authority seriously and using it when it's appropriate. I believe that it's a yes and. I think the Post Board can make some of those changes internally, but I think that some of those need to be supported as part of a legislative package. And I know there was questions from the legislature last year in the Criminal Justice Committee that asked about pushing the Post Board to be more assertive in doing that. We heard from chiefs of police when we were doing the Reducing Deadly Force working groups who said that they believed that the Post Board needed to be more assertive in using their authority because they were seeing themselves overruled by arbitrators in cases where they believe that the officer should not have been a police officer anymore. But once an arbitrator is ruled, chiefs of police have to live with that result.
Commissioner, were you surprised by the $13 million cost? Have they all now gone home, or what is the status?
I was not surprised by the $13 million. Horrified probably is a better term for it. I knew that when we bring in 7,000 plus National Guard members from all over the state that there was going to be a cost. We knew that that was going to be a cost. What that cost was going to be, I did not know, and we're in the process right now of calculating the cost of bringing every state trooper and all of the DNR and pulling together all of the other resources that it took to be able to resolve the riot successfully. So that would be the first question. Second question is, the Guard has been here since the beginning of the COVID piece, working in conjunction with public health to do swabbing and to help move resources. And so the number of Guard members that are still here in the cities that are working on that mission has not changed. The number of Guard members that were brought into the cities to deal with the riots has been reduced substantially at this point. I believe they have all been returned to their original assignments. Yes, I am. I've heard that through social media. Colonel Langer and his staff plan to be out there to meet with the groups, to explain to them the process that is already in existence for if you want to have a statue or you want to have something removed from the Capitol grounds. There is a lawful process for doing that. And we will be out there to meet with them to have that conversation about if this is something that the community wants and the legislature agrees with and all the parties that have to be part to that decision, then there is a lawful process to do that. But we plan to be out there to meet with them this afternoon.
Governor, should the state consider those, should we revisit some of these statutes? I know this is up this year. Is there going to be a renewed interest in things?
There will be. Yes, I think we should. I'm a geographer and historian by trade. I would go back to your earlier question, Dom, on the cost of the National Guard. It didn't surprise me because my full-time job was that at one time. I was a service sports specialist that figured these out. I think people are now maybe don't understand the complexity of what happened to move that many people in. But this question around symbolism is important. And I don't think we need to see it as a division. We know it came up with Bede Makaska. It came up with Fort Snelling at Badote. These issues come up because they matter. And I would just say yesterday I had a long conversation with our sovereign tribal leaders. And Chairman Jensvold is the chairman of the Yellow Medicine Band of Dakota, Upper Sioux. And he says every time he watches, we're friends. He gives me advice, and I very much trust him. He's wise. But he says every time he watches me and I stand in front of the seal of Minnesota, it brings pain to him. These are conversations that Minnesotans, it may seem, I hear it get pushed off as frivolous or political correctness. These are historical pains that led to what we saw happen with George Floyd and the anger that came out. So, Tom, I think your question is well taken. I think you're right. I think it's going to be hard. These are the types of things that can inflame emotion. But again, you're hearing everybody up here say it, and you're people on the streets. Our emotions are inflamed pretty well. Now we better start having those honest conversations. I missed you, Jesse. Sorry, and then I'll go back. That's a great question. I think all of you know that the challenges around this, and it's no secret. I am a lifelong union member. I've stood by my support. I believe unions have helped create the middle class and create workplace safety. But I also know that unions, when they're working right, would have been a union there to protect George Floyd, not to protect a police officer who went rogue. And I think it's going to be important for those of us who are union and supportive of it and see the value of them to stand up and say we cannot craft situations that shield inappropriate behaviors or the inability to be able to move people. And I know this is scary talk. If you're a union member, when you're talking about collective bargaining agreements, when you're talking about arbitration, some of those things, these are the core that holds things together. But I mean, when the first comment from the union was a pledge to get these officers their jobs back, not to find out justice and see if they did it, that's wrong. And I can tell you, as a union teacher, the person who's most angry about a bad teacher is a good teacher down the hall. And what I think is the role of the unions and the role of the teachers' unions is for those police that understand that they're going to have to speak up. This moment is not going to go unchallenged. So I think there's a role there. I think we have to look at it, and I am willing to say, and you've heard me say this many times, and I think it gets me in trouble, but I think it's an honest way to answer things is we have to be prepared to put every solution on the table and debate them that way, even though that starts to challenge us. And I know there's folks that when they hear that, they're like, well, what is that going to do to us? We're speaking specifically around police and police unions. So I do think if there's things that state law is holding up from fixing the problem and has leading to more of what we saw 2 weeks ago on the streets of Minneapolis, then we do have to fix that. Yes.
This has been a WDIO News Special Report.